Hi HR Nation, welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives from the world's leading global brands. Today we've got a special show. It's a first in the HR Leaders Podcast. We've got someone in the studio and we've got someone on Zoom. So joining us by the power of Zoom, we've got Katy Geraghty, Global Head of Onboarding at Accenture. Hey, how you doing, Katy?
I'm great. How are you, Chris?
I'm good. Nice to see you. And in studio, we've got Robert Fogarty, founder and storyteller at Dearworld. So this is amazing. First time we've had someone dual purpose, someone in studio, someone online. So before we jump in, Katy, we'll start with you. Tell everyone a little bit more about yourself personally and your journey to where we are now.
Sure. Okay. Personally, I live outside of Chicago, so I'm here in the United States today, and I am married with 3 grownish children.
Grownish. Okay.
Grownish children. They're still babies, even though my oldest is 21, and our golden doodle Penny. So that's me personally. We love good food, good wine, exercise to offset both of those 2 things in our free time. And the journey that got me here is I have been with Accenture actually a week from today. It'll be 23 years. I have my 23-year anniversary. Wow. And I've really grown up in the global HR space, mostly doing strategic programs, career development, talent development, leadership development, and recently onboarding. So that's my journey here.
Amazing. Amazing. Robert?
Yeah, personally, grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. I came of age in New Orleans. That's where I like to say my life changed. Now I live in Utah and I snowboard a lot. I just, before I got on the plane to England, I spent a day snowboarding with some friends and single, not married, like, no kids.
Single, ready to mingle as well. How did you both connect? What's the story behind this connection?
Oh boy. It's been 7 or 8 years, right, Robert?
That's right. Gosh. Katy.
Yeah. So I was leading a leadership development program for our most senior career level here at Accenture, our managing directors. And Robert had been doing an experience, a Dear World experience for some of our in-person leadership development courses. And we met that way and we started working together, doing in-person experiences for many, many years. And then I'm sure we'll get into this, but when we found ourselves in a global pandemic, we reached out and said, okay, how can we help each other?
Yeah. Well, I think for context then, tell everyone a little bit more about Dearworld, because then they have a bit of context.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you've ever seen a photograph on the internet where someone has black marker on their skin with a meaningful message, it was probably inspired by Dearworld, or we took it. We've photographed more than 125,000 people over the last 10 years. Started in New Orleans as an art project, asking people why they love the city. And then, it really moved into this more global storytelling project. And what I'm really excited about as an entrepreneur, we always found a way to fund the artistic side of the business. The charitable side of the business through working with teams and leaders on the hypothesis that if you can create a space where people get to learn and see and know each other in a way that feels authentic, they perform better together. So Dear World, the art project kind of exists because we found a way to provide value to teams, and it manifests in the same way. But that's been really cool that, I've gotten to go around the world and work with survivors of tragedies, charitable efforts, and that's all things that we're able to do because of companies who've invested in the leadership development work. So, but it's mostly known as these really beautiful portraits. And then that was before the pandemic. And then we pivoted to more of a narrative method in which it's about how to get people to their story rather than the glossy photograph now.
Yeah. It's interesting because I didn't even know that until right now.
Yeah.
And I have seen many of those photos, especially on LinkedIn, right? as well. So I just learned something new.
Those are us.
I think I want to touch upon a point is what you mentioned as well about the artistic side, because, you know, I grew up breakdancing. That was my first career. Right.
Oh,
and,
wow.
And I did that professionally and went on tour with artists and did major things. But before that, we always struggled to be able to do that because we didn't know how to fund it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Any of the creative projects. And that's something now I try and help my friends and the younger generation, because I grew up in quite a poor environment, and now I understand how to link that back to commercial.
Totally.
So how do I go and reach out to, for example, KFC recently to fund a local community project, arts project, and give back? And it's something that I realized, like, most people just don't understand how to do that and have the commercial awareness to be able to have those conversations. And it benefits everyone, right? Both the organizations, the community, socially, etc. So I think this is something interesting to touch upon. Katy, what's your driver behind going on this journey with Accenture?
For us, when we were working together with Robert, with our senior leaders, it was all about leading with authenticity, right? And proving to our leaders that you can be yourself at work, and that is what a true leader really is. And then, you know, as we our partnership grew and my role shifted to global onboarding, and we're now welcoming new joiners to Accenture at scale, we thought, you know, we're growing leaders at all levels here at Accenture. So why not bring this experience to our people on day one and show them that, yes, we are a large company, but your personal story does matter. And you can show up as who you truly are starting on day one. And we're all about personal stories and bringing yourself to work here at Accenture. So that's kind of how we've evolved the experience over time.
Yeah. No, I love this because when I first heard about your partnership and your work, it immediately resonated with me, because every day I'm speaking to CHROs on the show who are talking to me about how they really struggle, especially in the virtual environment, to connect those new hires who are working perhaps completely remotely to the values, the mission, and how do you create that glue, and people feel connected, right? In a virtual environment. So when I heard about this, I was like, yes, we need to be doing more of this, right? And it isn't like, not to overcomplicate it, it is something that any company can do. It's sharing our stories, what makes who we are. Tell everyone about the format, because I remember when I first saw the brain tattoo storytelling, I was like, what is this? I was like, I was like, an interesting name. Walk us through sort of the storytelling method that you use.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I think it's really interesting that you said that anybody can do it. The thing that after 10 years, you have to create conditions.
Yeah, the right conditions to do it, yeah.
But those are creatable in many ways. I think that, you know, what Katy and Accenture and Dear World, we're just one solution, a storytelling solution, I would say. But, you know, we've made every mistake in the book to tune out our method that I would say reasonably gets anyone anywhere, regardless race, religion, creed, to a space in which they'd be willing to share something meaningful. So the brain tattoo method is 3 steps. With Accenture, the first step is, and it's a 90-minute experience, all virtual, and we've trained our facilitators. But the 3 steps are actually quite simple, with really nice, subtle settings of expectations of, you don't have to go deep if you don't want to. All you got to be is a good listener to another partner in the room. A lot of these things that we set a lot of safety measures of, like, I think the biggest thing in storytelling that people get wrong is vulnerability is really important right now. But it's really delicate. So, like, you got to be very careful with people's personal stories. So our method, 3 steps, starts with introspective reflection, and we put music on, reflecting on their life. But we start by integrating the Accenture values in step 1. So they're reflecting on words like stewardship, one global network, integrity. But how does integrity show up in their life? And they're just free associating, on their own. And then there's a little pairing and sharing that happens between attendees, the new joiners, in breakout rooms and such. The second step is called identifying distinct memories. And in our second step, it's really important that as facilitators, we make everyone in the attendee, in the group, circle one of the values from step one. So if there's 100 people on the call, 10 are circling integrity, 20 are circling stewardship.
Is that the one that means the most to them?
Yeah, just in the moment.
That resonate with the most?
Yeah, and it's one of these things where in the second step, we're now asking them to find scenes. All stories have scenes from their life where one of those values was present or not present. So Chris, if you circled integrity, you'd be looking at that list that you were looking at in step one and thinking about times where integrity was present in your life or maybe not present. And we try and get you to very specific moments in your life. And for instance, when I did integrity, I had a moment where I was like, when I cheated on a math test, that's like what I wrote down. Like I was like, it was in high school, but it was kind of
remembered it.
Yeah. And so you get people to these scenes. And again, I think what's important, you give them a chance to get to many scenes so they don't feel boxed in, because you then ask them in step 3 to circle one scene. And then that's where we're getting into people are now sharing that scene with a partner. And then by the final step, which is create your brain tattoo, our third step is, and they actually put it on their hand, even in virtually, they come up with a short lead to that story. So mine could be like, I'll never cheat on a math test again.
Okay.
But then we share these stories where I could share that story if I'm a participant at the end of the facilitation, and the facilitators are really good. Katy and Katy has some amazing facilitators where they're looking to hear at least one story at the end of the experience from each of the values. So you're hearing a lived experience from a new joiner about what integrity means to them in their own life, or stewardship means to them in their own life. So 3 steps, all built on what we call brain tattoos, which are kind of like skin tattoos, but they're moments.
It's imprinted on your brain.
They're
I get it now.
Imprint memories, the brain tattoo method.
I get it.
And, after 10 years of doing the work, it's just really cool to have been able to teach it now because it's super consistent if you set the conditions.
Well, Katy, where do you bring this on the employee's journey? Where, if you're onboarding, where does this sit in that journey? Just
on day one. So we've created an experience that we call the New Joiner Experience, or NJX, 2-day welcome. And it is a 2-day experience overall that takes place largely in Microsoft Teams. Some of the experiences in the metaverse. So we are actually onboarding in virtual reality.
Oh, really?
But then your world experience happens on day one as part of that 2-day experience. And as Robert said, it's 90 minutes. And what I really love about it is if you think about how core values are typically introduced during new joiner orientation, I'm going to be very honest, it's kind of boring, right? Like it'd be slides, people might be multitasking. And so what I love about where we've come with Dear World and introducing our core values in this way is it truly immerses our new joiners in our core values, really helps them internalize the core values and personalize them. And then you walk away, that's durable learning, right? You're not going to forget the core values after going through an experience like that.
Yeah. Because sometimes it's like, and I've even made this mistake as well, and I feel like we still have made this mistake in this business, that you go through a process of making the values, but if you can't relate to it or connect to it in a way that resonates with you, you're just going to forget it. And you're not even going to remember it. And especially when you're being onboarded, you've got a million things going on. Just started a new job, it's a bit stressful, meeting a new manager, you're doing 1,000 things, and you get given this list of values. You're just going to, you're not really going to connect with that as well. And I think it's much more, I think one of the mistakes I see many companies do is they do similar, I didn't say similar things, they do other activities where it doesn't feel authentic either. It feels like they're being forced upon me, if that even makes sense. As well, and you're also building that glue and stickiness between those people that are joining together, so they've almost got like a buddy that they can go through the journey with, right?
Exactly. Because if you think about also onboarding initially during the pandemic, you were having people sometimes behind a laptop for a couple of days without meeting another person. And now we have this experience that is so authentic, and you're sharing personal stories. And what better way to connect to other people in your organization and to the organization than that?
Yeah. What's been the feedback that you've gotten from people?
The feedback's been amazing. I mean, we have, I call Dear World the darling of NJX, this new onboarding experience that we have, because new joiners are truly delighted and surprised by it. It's unexpected. We see posts on LinkedIn, and I've heard stories of tears and laughter and people reaching out to each other for support. So feedback has been phenomenal from our new joiners. And I will also say that Robert touched on this. We have created our own network of internal facilitators who have been certified by Dear World to be storytelling facilitators. And to see the bond that this group of 120 or so people that really was it's not their full-time job. This was a grassroots sort of volunteer type of initiative. And we had to turn people away because so many people wanted to be a Dear World storyteller. So now to see that group supporting each other, sharing ideas on how to run a huge session really well, or what do you do if you only have a few people? And they really are a self-sufficient group of storytellers that lean on each other, and they continue to connect in with our Dear World partners for ongoing development and reinforcing their storyteller experience. So that's been kind of an unexpected and delightful surprise out of all of this.
Mm-hmm. So did you start with a smaller group then? Like how many people did you bring in the first? Obviously a huge organization. You didn't go all in with everyone, I'm assuming. So did you choose a small?
Yeah, we pilot, and Katy, you can fill in here, but we've run 8 cohorts. Typically the cohorts for the certified storytellers are no more than 30. So our team is, we onboarded that first video I think you saw was probably 20 and started to tune it out throughout last year. But now we're up to 120, but we do a cohort based and then ongoing professional development and learning, as Katy's talking about. But yeah, we've been kind of chunking it out, and they're really good. There's some really incredible star facilitators. And that's what I've been really, Chris, hardened by. As we were talking before, my life was on planes, in real life, delivering these facilitations in person, always knowing though it was the method was consistent, repeatable, teachable, trainable, and to have corroborated that by seeing some of Katy's storytellers just make moves that I wish I could make. There's some incredible people who, and I think what you mentioned too is the facilitators are so important to hold the space of authenticity, of meaning. And I think that's why Dear World has worked, because it feels bigger than Accenture in a way. Feels bigger.
It doesn't feel like it's coming from the top down, right?
It doesn't feel like a training exercise. It feels like, I get to be a part of this thing that started really very humbly back in the day. And I think the facilitators, Katy, if I could argue, right, they hold on to that, right, that they are really happy to be Dear World certified storytellers and what that means, for them. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how are you sharing this internally? And because are you filming some of these stories and sharing them for the rest of the business, and just out of curiosity, encapsulating some of that?
We don't do it that way because, as Robert said, stories are so personal, right? And we don't want the new joiners to feel guarded or like we're going to expose them. We want them to truly bring themselves to this activity. But we're seeing so much activity on LinkedIn, and our storytellers are getting emails of thanks from our new joiners and things like that we can kind of pull together to share the success.
Yeah. What are the lessons you learned? Obviously, this is all great, but I'm sure there were mistakes made along the way on both sides of how to effectively do this. What are some of the lessons that you both learned of how you introduce something like this? Because if there's people listening right now that are thinking about doing something different, I'm sure it wasn't all easy. I'm sure there were barriers, right, on both sides. So could you share some of those for our listeners? Because I'm sure they're thinking, I would love to do this, but they're already probably creating barriers themselves in their own minds.
I'll name two, and Katy, I'll just name two, and you can name however many. I think the first for us was understanding global cultural subtleties, and being able to name that, a Filipino facilitator versus an Indian facilitator versus a German facilitator in their market units, and how some things play a little better than others in terms of the Dear World experience. So that'd be one that I think we learned as we went, and we made some really good adaptations. And then I think the second one that's important to name is, well, shoot, let me just give that. That's my first one. Yeah, we'll go to Katy.
I'll build on that and say that I think sometimes what we've learned is that we underestimate our own people's willingness to share. And so, as Robert was saying, there are these nuances culturally. And what we heard from some of our stakeholders in the different markets is that, this just won't work for our culture on day one. New joiners, it feels awkward. And we're seeing the opposite, right? And so I think, we sometimes just underestimate our own people's willingness to share and the desire to be heard. So that's been a great thing. And for some of those cultures where there are the nuances, like we have our storytellers, they tee it up in a way that you can go as emotional as you want, or you might have a really compelling business story to tell that maybe isn't quite as emotional, but it absolutely anchors to one of our core values of client value creation or something like that. And so there's a spectrum of like how deep you want to go that is absolutely allowed.
So I suppose one of the expectations is setting expectations. One of the things that you learned was we need to set the expectations up front, let people know that you can go as deep as possible, and then that kind of takes I feel a bit more comfortable now, because I can imagine that there are going to be people that you kind of bring this up with. They go, oh my God, I have to share everything with these people. So I think that's a great learning.
Chris, one of my favorite sayings is people will meet or exceed your expectations as long as you set them. And that is so important to name. And I think one of the things that is really important as we grow, as the trend lines are moving towards authenticity in the workplace, bringing your whole self to work, mental health. My second big one of the learning curve is also being aware that out of 100 people, no matter their background, there's still going to be a percentage, no matter the guardrails, no matter the expectations, are kind of in the like, nope, my work is my work and my personal life is my personal life, like that. And Katy and I, like, we've made the calculated risk that we're always, you're going to struggle.
That's also okay, though.
You're going to have some people who just, the minimum viable participation is just being a good listener to, like, when you're paired up is, but it's, I think it's been one of those things to be like, you can't please every person all the time. Like,
that's with everything, though, right?
That's with everything. And I think, though, I've sometimes struggled of like, I
want to please everyone. You
don't think everyone doesn't think this is great. But that's and I'd imagine you've gotten that with your own survey, your own data. If you're not taking, like, I'd much rather have, a scale in which we're getting NPS scores that are super high. And then we have a group at the back end rather than a bunch of like 7s. I love seeing a bunch of 9s and then maybe a couple 2s.
You need the feedback as well, right? Like, that's why I asked that question, because it's all well and good us saying this, but it's the lessons that you've learned along the way are the most valuable ones.
Totally.
And there's so many companies that I see that they talk about all these great things, and it's great to hear the success, but it's also the learnings along the way where the magic happens.
Well, I got to thank Katy. She's been very gracious with being our first big partner. We've learned a lot from her and from their team. It's really been a co-created thing. And I think there's, a different partner may have not given us the grace to learn this beautiful art technique narrative and then scaling it to the way she scaled it. So I got to just shout you out, Katy, for that.
Well, it really was an experiment, right? Together. And it came at a time where I was new in the global onboarding space and was asked to really innovate in this, innovate the program, seeing that we weren't going to be in person anytime soon. And the experiment happened at the perfect time. And thank goodness we had that relationship in the past. But truly what we did was we went from this in-person experience where Robert and his team, right, flew to where we were with our leadership program. And now we've scaled it to hundreds of thousands of new joiners virtually. So it's been an amazing transformation.
Isn't that cool though? That we were talking before we went live for this podcast, that I used to do the small CHRO roundtable workshops in person. And one of the things that I'm most excited about now is that now we're doing it virtually. We can reach millions of people. And we democratize that content and that experience. So a lot of people are like, Chris, when are you going back to face-to-face? And I'm like, I am going to maybe at some point, but I'm never going to lose this virtual element that I'm able to include and see. And the fact that when I look at our data and I see people from India and South America and countries that I didn't even know existed tuning in to listen to our content and be part of our community, I'm like, wow, it's so cool to be able to do that as well. So that's another thing. So do you think without the pandemic that you would have ever done this virtually?
No, I mean, Dear World is in particular a use case in the innovation. What is that phrase?
Innovate or die.
Necessity is the mother of all innovation.
Yeah, it is. Sure. Yeah.
It took us 10 years to photograph 150,000 people, 125,000 people in this glossy version, and with one client in 1 year, we're going to do more than 150,000 people going through Dear World.
Really? That many? Wow.
Yeah. By the end of our fiscal year, which is the end of August, we'll probably have had over 200,000 new joiners go through the experience.
And isn't that me, it's just crazy. I sit back.
That's just one company.
Just one company.
That's crazy. I think the experience, because I do feel that, and actually I'll ask you this question rather than saying it, Katy. Why is the onboarding experience so important, and what are the ramifications of doing it badly?
Well, I always equate it to a first date, right? Where you go on a first date and it doesn't go well, or it's just kind of even meh. You're going to be questioning, do I want to continue? Did I even make the right decision? Is this a valuable use of my time? And that is absolutely the opposite of what we want our new joiners thinking and feeling on day one. We want them feeling like, oh my gosh, I made the right decision. I'm in the right place. I belong. I'm connected. And so, there's a lot of research around onboarding. And if you don't get it right, the direct correlation to an employee's satisfaction and even attrition. And so that's the best way I can explain it. Is it's a first date. You want it to go well if you want it to continue.
Yeah. I think I've certainly joined companies on my first day and been like, oh, what am I doing here? I can't log into my computer. There is no computer that hasn't even arrived. I can't, it is traditionally a company, not many companies do it great, especially in a virtual environment. It's even worse. I've seen from friends and family members that have been through this process as well. Is there a time where you ever think you're going to do a hybrid version as well?
Katy, we're standing at the ready for you. If I know that we do have another client who has trained both IRL and virtual to be able to. There's some moves that are much different. The method is durable, but there's a little bit of technique in IRL that is different.
Otherwise, in real life, in case people don't know.
Yeah,
just in case of people that don't know what that means. Because I feel like it would be quite weird where you have maybe people in the room and then a couple on the screen. It may not have the same impact. Have you tried that?
That I think is going to be some of the space setting, and I think what meeting designers and experience designers are going to struggle with in this is how do you design for both virtual and IRL?
I think everyone's struggling with that. It's like that in every element of the workplace as well. Yeah.
And where does employee choice come into that equation, right? Because we are hearing that our employees want to have a choice and work fully from anywhere. And so it's all swirling around right now, and we will shape a point of view on kind of the longer term vision for how this gets delivered. But as you were saying, Chris, we've learned a lot, and it's getting great feedback, and it's working. And so we can't forget that.
What advice would you give to our listeners who are listening right now, who perhaps want to take this idea to the leadership team? What advice would you, because you've had to do this, right? You've gone through it. Sounds like you've got a very supportive leadership team, which already helps as well. But what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I would say definitely go for it, experiment, pilot, learn quickly, be agile. This again, like it was, we rolled up our sleeves, Robert and I, and we were brave and we were like, let's try it and see if it sticks. And it did. So I'd say just go for it. And also for some of the people that work at larger companies like Accenture, or even not as large, but still large, don't underestimate the value of change management. So my team had to kind of really help our different stakeholders around the world through the change curve of this is a different way of doing things, and even bringing them through the experience themselves so that they could understand what our new joiners were going to go through. So change management played a key role in all of this. Yeah,
well, that's a great piece of advice. Involve them in the journey, right? Get those leaders to be part of the initial cohort and journey, and get them involved. I think that's a really good way of doing it.
Can I ask Katy a question?
Yeah, go. You ask many questions you want. Go for
Katy,
it.
how can you give us lift behind the curtain? How did you pitch Dear World to the stakeholders, and who was in the room? I mean, how did you make the value prop viable?
I think the first thing is, Robert, you might not even remember this, but I joined one of your experimental sessions it was me and people from other companies, and just to kind of learn how this could be done virtually. And I started to think about the way, I think I even pulled up the way that we were introducing core values to new joiners on slides, and how boring it was, right? And I think that's a huge business case in and of itself. You don't want your core values to be boring, right? And they're not. They're very, very inspiring core values. And so that's really what it took, was let's immerse our new joiners in our core values. Let's connect them with each other to share stories of their own lives that align with the core values. That's pretty compelling.
Yeah.
So that's what's interesting for us, Chris. Our biggest learning is Katy was able to get the deal. She made the deal on our and we found some statistics that, only 2 in 10 employees can actually state their values, let alone see themselves in them.
Connect with them, yeah.
And so that it wasn't just a storytelling exercise for team building, or for storytelling's sake. There was a learning outcome, which participants will be able to align a meaningful story with one of Accenture's core values, was where I would argue we got the deal done. Not, hey, let's have them tell stories.
It sounds fluffy otherwise, right? It needs to be connected to,
And I just love that Katy kind of got that deal done. That's how now we are really positioning. Storytelling's great, but storytelling for the sake of storytelling doesn't move stakeholders.
Doesn't move the needle. Yeah.
But storytelling as a means to align people with the core values of the firm starts to get, I think, important, because it sounds like Katy and many companies struggle with, here's our values on the PowerPoint deck. we live them every day, but do we really? And then you move on.
Yeah.
And this is what's been great about our partnership.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's perfect. And we always talk about like, how do we reach the hearts and minds of our people? And it's through storytelling. And now you've managed to connect that back to the core business values, and which is going to drive the right behaviors, which is going to drive the right outcomes as well. So what would you say is the next step? Is there like, because I'm sure there's a point where you're like, I want to see the data, the insights, and how do we measure this? I'm thinking maybe so far ahead. I know you're kind of new on the journey, but I'm sure that's something would be super fascinating to look at, especially when you have a certain set, or, you know, in this case, a couple of 100,000. You know, you can do surveys, I'm sure you're doing, right? Surveys to see what people's feedback are. That's probably what you're going to say. But is there a step for you as well?
Social media posts, things like that we have in our arsenal right now. I think measurement in general is a tough nut to crack in the learning and leadership development space, even in our own educational space outside of business. It's really a tough nut to crack. So I'd love to join one of your pods to hear someone or listen to one where someone is actually innovating in that space. But yeah, we'll continue to think about measurement. It's still a brand new experience, even though we've got huge numbers that we talked about. It is still brand new. And so I think it's a matter of just tweaking and continuing. We'll have some storytellers who are kind of going through what we call a re-up, which is like, kind of freshening their skills and continuing to get better. And then we'll have some new cohorts go through it.
Love it. Love it. I don't even know where else to go from there. I think it's just amazing. I think every company should have something, whether it's your organization or others, a way to deliver their values and again, create that glue with employees outside of the traditional. It's just like the fact that it's taken us this long. I think the last 2 years has been a wake up call, obviously, with everyone being disconnected. I think it really showed that, you know, work is no longer a place you go to. So if you don't have that connective tissue outside of a physical building, then how do people feel like this is who we are? This is what we stand for. This is the company I'm proud to go and work for. And I think there's also other hidden values of, for example, the innovation that's going to come through those connections. You know, a lot of companies are struggling with, how do we create that network? How do I network when I work remote full time? And how do you're not going to bump into someone in the hallway at home as well. So the fact that you're connecting some of these individuals so early on in their careers, I can only imagine years from now, the insights, the innovation that's going to come from those people from different functions, different parts of the world that are connecting. And I think that's really cool as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And just think about, when our new joiners graduate from their 2-day orientation and they go to their teams, right? Their teams and their projects. And someone says, how did your new joiner orientation go? And then they have a story to share.
A story within a story. Yeah.
Right?
It's true. And we talk about culture. This is the type of stuff that shapes your culture, right? If you're a part of an organization where, imagine years from now, where you've got multiple generations of the workforce that have been through that experience, how cool that's just going to be part of the vocabulary of the organization of how we are onboarded here. And this is what it means to be onboarded at Accenture and work in the organization as well.
We're definitely, I'm a big believer in ritual building as a part of culture that with Accenture, and creating spaces in which, anyone, anywhere can have a meaningful experience, but it's towards this bigger goal. And that's, I think, my dream is that this becomes a ritual at Accenture that, when you're talking about, there's some allegory, there's some anecdotal, like the data, but when you're talking about how are we going to measure this, I can't wait until a new joiner in 2020 is promoted to managing director or gets some sort of award. And my big hope is that one of their opening stories, if that's on a stage or virtual, is like, let me tell you about my first day at Accenture. And I got to tell a story about what integrity means to me or whatever. And I think that's going to happen. And that feels really cool to start to think about how, we are social beings who communicate through story, and giving people not only an experience, but the tools, like you're saying, to create a story within a story is actually happening.
Yeah, exactly.
Because often our anecdotes about our lived experiences can take on new lives when you share them with others who you care about.
Yeah.
And so it's really appropriate that you said a story within a story, because we often find meaning in each other by sharing ourselves with each other in these experiences. And it takes a lot of, you got to give credit where credit is due to the experienced designers like Katy, because you can't shortcut that stuff. It wasn't easy to put 90 minutes in for something that some people could be like, oh, we could just get these values done in a slide.
Or an email, even worse.
Yeah. And I think
I've seen people be emailed their values.
And that's the payoff, That's the payoff, in my opinion. And
yeah. Also, I did something similar at a retreat many years ago, where I sat down with CEOs, entrepreneurs of literally my table. I had like 3 billionaires on the table. I was like the poorest person there. I was like, what am I doing here? But one of the things we did they called it like the crucible journey, where you shared one of the worst moments of your life. And this is day 1 hour into the session. And I'm sitting with these strangers and I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, I want you to basically share 2 of the worst moments of your life with these 3 strangers. And by the way, they did set expectations. Yeah. Share as much or as little as you want, just to be clear. Because I was like, whoa. But I shared more with those strangers and learned more from them than I have, and I'm sad to say, with some of my closest friends. Yeah. And employees. And I left those 2 days feeling, and I still to this day chat to those people. It's like 5 years later, we still chat. We still got a WhatsApp group. We're still really good friends. And it was because we bonded over those moments that were some of the worst moments in our lives. But really, you look at each other in a different way. You look at Chris and go, he's not just the CEO of the company. Yes, he battles with anxiety. He has panic attacks. He's a dad. He's a husband. He grew up poor. You just just those things, you have this shared bond, and you'll find, and by the way, you might not have anything in common, but you still have that respect and understand now that where Chris is coming from. Yeah. And that was because I honestly nearly skipped that meeting, and I said to Shane, it's too fluffy. I ain't got time for that. I'm busy. I'll be honest. I gave all the excuses of why I shouldn't go to it. And I was like, do I really need to find my why and my value and my purpose? I was like, whatever. That is literally how it was. And I was like, all right, I'm going to give it a go. And it was anything but.
Thanks for sharing with us.
Yeah. I'm not going to share the stories with you because I might cry. So we're not going to go into those now. But before I let you both go, firstly, congratulations to both of you on everything. And for anyone listening, I'm going to play a short clip of the video, which is from the first cohort
of our certified storytellers.
Right now.
Congratulations on becoming Dear World storytellers. Dear horns up for all of you. And I just want to take a moment to recognize how far we've come together.
I know little about Dear World.
From colleagues and from photos and the video.
I'm truly excited about this. This is something new.
I have a little bit of experience. I know there's some themes of openness and authenticity and vulnerability.
I have been through multiple Dear World experiences.
And it's actually really helped me heal through different things.
There was a photographer.
I did see a couple of
pictures.
There's a marker.
And there's some writing.
And all I can think of is connections.
Everyone has a story, and everyone's story is important.
3 weeks ago, you met Robert and myself in the Dear World team, just 3 weeks, and got your first exposure to Dear World and the power of personal stories. My favorite part of that day was seeing you start to share your stories with one another.
Once upon a time,
Accenture chose me.
He was only a year old.
You want to go work in daycare, go work in daycare.
I can be myself better than I can be anyone else.
Even when I get rejected sometimes.
And that was my
authentic self being born.
So every time, I think I'm having a bad day, I think about him and his life and what he went through.
By the end of the week, you had your own list, brain tattoo, story, and message, and were ready to start practicing. I remember you coming back from your first breakout room and nearly everyone was laughing at how clumsy they had felt reading through the script.
I started off, the first thing was that nerve that got the better of it. Then when you got to the script, you were like, okay, this is what I need to go. I think it's all about the preparation.
And just readjusting if needed so that it felt more natural.
There is a script, there is a beat by beat, but once you're there in the playground, things can be very different.
I overtalk.
I hadn't thought through sort of the more undersharing.
And go to the next subject, you know.
When they've shared their story, it's kind of them giving you permission to ask those deeper questions.
Because as facilitators, it just helps you reflect.
It's something that will really help me run a really smooth session.
This is something that's been done over and over and over again and is shown to be effective.
How far we've come. From there, we dived into the nuts and bolts, modeling at 200%, holiday lights over floodlights, getting your reps in. We even sent you on a scavenger hunt. And this week, you proved to us just how much you've been listening as you finished delivering out an end-to-end brain tattoo facilitation.
Keep your script in front of you, but also personalize it so that the experience is more meaningful.
The use of someone's name is just in itself validating.
Because I feel a connection to the person and I'm more engaged.
Give the stories the reverence that they're due and give the process the reverence that it's due.
We really have to be on and to be in it and be present.
Kind of build that trust with our audience.
What I know is that you have the support and beliefs in each other to keep growing and helping others share their stories and grow too.
We have life stories, like a lifetime of stories. And there's so many great moments.
There's no story too small. There's nothing too small.
It's not going to just help me professionally. It's going to help me personally.
I hope you keep learning about yourself and others as you continue on this journey, helping every person realize that they have a story worth sharing.
And then we're back. So I hope you enjoyed that video and give you a better idea of what to expect. But how can people connect with you both if they want to learn more? Katy, where can people reach you?
Well, I would say from a new joiner perspective, we are hiring. So go to Accenture.com and you'll see a link for our course, and feel free to apply and join Accenture. You'll get this experience on day one.
Amazing. And for other HR leaders, are you okay for them to reach out to you, for example, on LinkedIn and connect with you? Because I'm sure many of them will have some questions for you of how you did this.
For sure.
Amazing. And yourself, Robert?
Yeah, it's funny. You know, I've been calling it the Great Reconnection that we're working day in and day out here at Dear World with people who believe in authentic storytelling experiences in real life or on virtual. So if you're someone who wants to use the power of storytelling to connect your teams in the Great Reconnection, dearworld.com. Amazing.
And as always, for everyone listening, those links are already below. So make sure you go and click on those links now. And there'll also be links to both of your LinkedIn profiles below. So go and connect. Apart from that, thank you so much for sharing your stories with us on the show. And we wish you all the best until next week. Bye for now.
Love you, Katy.
Bye. See you soon.
Much love.